this weekend we're going to be reading a special parasha. Parashat Parah Aduma. Besides for the regular parasha, we're going to be reading Parashat Tzav. But besides for the regular parasha, we're going to be reading something called Parashat Parah Aduma. This Parashat Parah Aduma, what is it? It's the recounting of the red cow, the red heifer. That was a service that was done in the times of the Beit HaMikdash to purify the Jewish people. And we recounted every year the week preceding, the week before, the weekend before. Look, basically we have four parashiyot that we read up until Nisan. We have Shkalim, which we did a few weeks ago. We have Zachor, which we did last week. Zachor, Tasher, Asar, Cham, Amalek. Everything that Amalek did for you, you have to remember to wipe out Amalek, to erase Amalek. This is an obligation from the Torah. Everyone had to go and listen to it this weekend to remember Parashat Amalek. If you didn't go, you can still make it up in a time where it comes up in the parasha. And then this weekend, we're going to read Parah. And then you have the last one, which is Parashat HaChodesh. Parashat HaChodesh is the one we read right before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The weekend preceding Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which this year is going to be 2 weeks from this Shabbat, meaning this Shabbat and another Shabbat, the week after, it's going to be Parashat HaChodesh we're going to read. Always the week preceding Parashat HaChodesh, we read something called Parashat Parah Aduma. Now, why is it? Why is it this order? Why do we have Parah Aduma and then right away into the Chodesh? Anyone know the answer? Why we do it in such order? Parashat Aduma. And then from there, we go straight into Parashat HaChodesh, and then we come into Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And obviously, we know what happens in Nisan, Pesach. So what's going on over here? What's the service? What's the order? So we really have two answers. The Mishnah Berurah and the Levush, they say that this is going according to the order that was done in the Midbar, in the wilderness. When we were in the Midbar, what was the order? Lechora, what is Parah Aduma? What did the Parah Aduma do? We sacrificed the red cow on the altar. We took its ashes, we mixed it with water, and we would sprinkle it on the Jewish people. And the person we sprinkled the water on, the Kohen who sprinkled the water on, would become pure. Pure from what? Pure from Tumat, from the impurity of Tumat Tamet. The impurity of the dead. Which today, by the way, we don't have the ability to do that. And that's why every single one of us have on us something called the spiritual impurity of Tumat Tamet.
It's actually a red cow?
Huh? It's you ever seen a picture of it? It's kind of like a brownish, red-brown. It's not red, bright red in the regular color that you would imagine it to be. It's not like these chairs over here. No, it's something more like a mahogany. It's almost like a woodish color. It's like a tint of brown, almost a little bit of an orangish color. And today you can find it. But the klal is that it's very, very specific. It cannot have any yolk, any burden on it in its whole entire life. It can't have certain type of hairs, no red, no black, so on and so forth. But obviously we didn't come to talk about all the inyanim, all the laws of Parashat Aduma, Parah Aduma, because we're going to talk about that later on when we get to Bamidbar, Parashat Chukat. Over there, in Parashat Chukat, over there we're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth. But this week we just recounted. Why? It says the Mishnah Berurah and the Levush, as we were going over before, that it follows the order. What happened in the order of in the wilderness? First thing first, we have to purify ourselves. We would set up the Mishkan, they set up the Mishkan, then they would purify themselves with the Parah Aduma, and only then, when they were pure, could they bring Korban Pesach. So what ended up happening, says the Mishnah Berurah and the Levush, that they built the Mishkan before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and immediately after they finished building it, what did they do? They slaughtered the red heifer, they brought it as a sacrifice, purified the Jewish nation, and afterwards, after Nisan came in, they were all pure to give the Korban Pesach. Makes sense, it follows the order. And that's why we do it now. Parashat Aduma. And then from there, Parashat HaChodesh. Very nice. So far, so good? Makes sense? Good. Chacham Ovadia, in Chazon Ovadia, turns this whole thing upside down. He says, wait a minute. It seems to me that the Mishnah Berurah and the Levush, maybe they forgot what's written in the Yerushalmi, in Masechet Megillah, in Yerushalmi. Over there, it's written a whole different story. Over there, it says that the Mishkan was actually, when was it built? In the first of Nisan. And when did they slaughter the Parah Aduma? In the second of Nisan. So really, what should come first? The Chodesh. If we're going according to the events of what happened, what should come first? Rosh Chodesh came first. And only afterwards was the slaughtering of the Parah Aduma on the second of Nisan. This is the Gemara in Masechet Megillah, Yerushalmi. Says, I don't understand. Why is the order the way it is? Chacham Ovadia says in the end that even though we have this seeming contradiction in when we say it and how we say it, the common custom is to do like we do it, which is Parah Aduma, and then HaChodesh. Why? Because Parah Aduma signifies the purification of the Jewish nation. Coming into the month of Nisan, we need to become pure. And the mashma'ut, the way it sounds like for the Shon of Chacham Ovadia, is that even today when you go to hear it, it's purifying you. It's not purifying you necessarily from tumat amet. You cannot take away the spiritual impurity until we do the whole ritual sacrifice. However, when a person goes over there and he listens to Parashat Aduma, which most of the Rishonim hold is mitzvah d'oraita. Most of them hold it, you have to go and listen to it. Even the women should go on Shabbat, this Shabbat, and go listen to it. Everyone should make as much as an effort as they possibly can to go this Shabbat and listen to Parashat Parah Aduma. Says Chacham Ovadia, seemingly from his Lashon, that even today when a person goes to listen, it purifies him. But what's going on over here? What's the whole inyan of this Parashat, this Parah Aduma? What does it come to signify? What's the connection to it? Why does it purify? Why is it called? It's one of the things, the Midrash, there are many chukim, different things that the Midrash relates as a chok. You know what a chok is? What's a chok? What's the difference between a chok and every other a law? So what's the difference between a law and every other thing else? So what's a mishpat? What's mishpatim? Ela mishpatim. Judgment? So law, judgment, and what's zichronot? What is the remembrance? So we have really three types of different of mitzvot. We have something called zichronot, or testimonies, which in essence, what is in a testimony? Hashem says, you will keep the Shabbat as a testimony that what? That I created the world in 7 days, and on the seventh day I rested. That's a testimony. What's a mishpat? The things that make sense to us. The mistaber, they fit in our mind. Like for example, don't kill, don't steal, don't covet thy neighbor, so on and so forth, right? All these things, they make sense. And they're actually essential laws to civilization. That world cannot continue without them. And then there's something called chukim. What are chukim? Something that seemingly on face level, if you're looking at it, doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense. And therefore it's something called a divine ordinance. It's something called a divine ordinance. It means it's something heavenly, something divine that comes down from heaven that necessarily to us, when we're looking at it, it doesn't necessarily make sense to us. It's something that maybe it's irrational. And we're going to talk about them a little bit in depth, and we're going to essentially go into Parah Aduma, because Parah Aduma, out of all of them, we're going to see is actually one of the strongest. It's actually one of the ones that was the most difficult to understand. Why? We'll see in a little bit. We see actually, as we said earlier, that many of the Rishonim hold that we have to go and listen to it, mitzvah min Torah. Among them is Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch himself calls the Tosafot in Gemara Masechet Berachot, and even though there's Chorkim, even though there's people who say that you shouldn't go, we should know that every single one of them, us, should make our efforts to go as much as possible and to go and listen. Now, on this you have a question. Have you ever seen in the Torah any place in the Torah that says, and remember the Parah Aduma? Nowhere in the Torah does it say, remember the Parah Aduma. So what is this? Even Shulchan Aruch himself, the greatest person, the one that we all follow, Maran, Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, he writes that it's an obligation from the Torah. Where do you see a pasuk in the Torah that says this? Do you see a pasuk in the Torah that says, remember the red heifer? Huh? So over here we have a few answers. Yakut Gilshoni, he writes in this a commentary. He says, you know what the Torah says you do have to remember? You have to remember that you angered God. What does it mean that we angered God? We angered God in the wilderness. When did we anger God in the wilderness? When we did Chet HaEgel. Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf, that you have to remember. You have to remember that our ancestors, they did the sin of the golden calf. Ela im ken you're a Levi, then Ashrecha. But if not, you have to remember. You have to remember what our ancestors did. So what is it? Every year, imagine now we come out Parashat Parah or Parashat Agla Ufa, or whatever you want to call it. Parashat, what's it called? Agla, whatever you want to call it. This, that, whatever you want to call it. Every single year you have to go up and read the sin of the Jewish people that they did with the golden calf. Huh? Every year, imagine. What bizayon? What a bizayon. Imagine the embarrassment every single Jew has to do. Not only have to read it one time and be remembered of it, and Baruch Hashem did us a chesed that they put it in Levi'i, in the Aliyah of the Levi, so no Israel has to go up there. I think I said over here that story one time. A guy came up to me and asked me, he says, oh, I don't understand that. So you think a Jewish person would really care if you went up and you heard it? I said if he was emotionally sensitive to what was going on over there, he would be. That's the reality of the world. If a person had that emotional sensitivity, he would be able to feel it. Now imagine now every time you come up and you have to listen now and you have to hear and recount this tremendous, terrible sin that we spoke about in the past, how bad it was and what it brought down to the world. Until today, we're suffering over this sin. Until today, we have to review endlessly the Torah that we not to forget it, or because the sin of the golden calf. So imagine every single year now. I tell you now, you want to get up, you have to remember. You have to remember. So in like the same way we do shakalim, we do shekel, zecher matzit shekel. We remember. Okay, no problem. Zachor Amalek, very nice. Remember Amalek to raise them to this, and then all of a sudden, shut that in the middle. I tell you, you know what? Now remember the sin that you did. And we go up and we're reading and the sea. When is it? When is it fall? It should be one of the happiest months. We're leading up to Nisan. And what are you telling me now? Go now and listen to one of the saddest things, one of the most tragic things. And remember that in the middle of the sea of the peak of your building up to Pesach. As we know that the Simcha Vadar continues into Nisan. Because, in the middle of all this, now let me tell you all this. So says the Yekut HaGishoni, you want to know why we don't read it? Because we read this instead. As Rashi says, he brings down a parable. And this in the over there, when it comes to in Parashat Chukah, when it comes to talking about the Parah Aduma, he brings down a parable from Rabbi Moshe Ardarshan. And he says a parable of a maidservant of one of the kings, who her son went into the king's palace and defiled the place. He did sorry for yourself, he did dolim all over the place. All over the place. The son of the maidservant. Rashi brings a parable for Moshe Darshan. The Haddame's son, the maidservant's son, the Shifra. A little kid. He comes now. He does tzu'ah. He does, bathroom all over the palace of the king. Not every room, but all over on the floor, or on the palace, somewhere on the floor. Huh? No, I'm talking about just a parable. It's not a real story. אל תדאג, לא. לא עכשיו ימי אחשוורוש או אחשוורוש, המולך הדו וכוש. No, that's what it is. ימי אחשוורוש או אחשוורוש, המולך מהודו וכוש, ויש צועה על הרצפה. Where do you see the story? איפה הבאת, אחי? איך בורים, אחי? בוקר טוב. איך התעוררת in the middle of a סוגיה, אחי? Rashi over there and talks of Parah Aduma. What does he say in regards to Parah Aduma? Why is it the thing that purifies us? He says a parable. And he gets that what? A maidservant of Shifra, her son, does tzu'ah, does bathrooms all over the place. What's appropriate? Who's going to clean it? The king is going to come and clean it now? No, what's appropriate? Haman. Who's going to come and clean it now? What's appropriate? Haman and his 10 sons. No, who's going to come and clean it now? It's appropriate. The mother's going to clean after her child. He says, you know who cleans up for the chet of Egel? For the calf? For the golden calf? The Parah Aduma. A parah is what? What's a cow? It's a mother. What's a Egel? What's a calf? A baby cow. The mother comes to atone for the sins of her child. So when you're reading Parah Aduma, what are you doing? You're really atoning yourself for that sin. And therefore, internally, inversely, as you're remembering the atonement for the sin, you're also remembering the sin. And therefore, in a nice way, the Torah is kind of doing us a favor. Instead of making you remember this tragic event, we make you remember the good event that happened, the atonement for it, the goodness. However, Chamavadia doesn't like this answer for a few reasons. And it gives another answer from Aruch HaShulchan. Aruch HaShulchan brings another answer. And he says, in regards to Parah Aduma, it says twice in the Pasuk, Chukat Olam, twice. One in the 10th verse of the 19th chapter, and one in the 21st verse in the 19th chapter. Chukat Olam. Says, why do we need a double language? Why do we need to say twice an eternal decree? Lechora, you would have thought that one would have been enough. So what it says Aruch HaShulchan, from here you learn, what does it mean an eternal decree? One time to teach you that forever we have to do the Parah Aduma. Every year we have to do Parah Aduma. And the second one is now in our times when we no longer have the Beit HaMikdash, we no longer have the Mishkan, we no longer have the ability to do the Parah Aduma, we still have an eternal decree to do what? To remember it every single year. And now we see a source from the Torah, you have to remember every single year Parah Aduma. Either way you want to learn it. But in essence we see that Parah Aduma has a very special essence to it. And what is that? To repent on us. To help the Jewish nation. And the mashma'ud and the way it sounds from Chazon Ovadia, that even today a person who goes, he gets atonement. He gets forgiveness. Now what's so special about this Parah Aduma? Now let's get into a little bit of the details of Parah Aduma. Tiny bit. So really, as we said before, a Parah Aduma is one of the many many chukim, many divine ordinances that come down. The Midrash in Bamidbar Rabbah, it quotes a few of them among the many. And among them, it quotes Parah Aduma. Now we should know that this that we said a chok is beyond our comprehension, is something that's divine. It doesn't mean that you can't understand it. It doesn't mean it has no logic. It doesn't mean that it's irrational. Rabbeinu Bachya actually tells us afuch. Not that it has no logic and it's just something that you have to... No. The logic is above us. It's so logical, it's so divine that we cannot grasp that wisdom. We cannot hold it. We cannot bring it down and say, okay, we're trying to figure it out. Everything else in the Torah, if you spend enough time learning and going through it, you'll figure out why it makes sense. But there's certain things in the Torah that as much as you're trying to figure out back and forth the rationale of it, maybe it won't make sense to you. But I have a question to you. I just explained to you guys 2 minutes ago the sense in Parah Aduma. Did it make sense to you? It's atoning for the baby, the calf, and it's coming. It makes sense so far. No, I would have been okay with that answer. So what's so not sensical about it? What's something that's so irrational about it? So on this we have to really go to Gemara Masechet Yoma. And over there it brings us to Machloket Chachamim and Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva maintains, the great Rabbi Akiva, you know what he says? You know what is so odd about Parah Aduma? Is that it purifies the person. If you're pure, if you're impure, it makes you pure. But if you're pure, it makes you impure. So it has the ability to change a person who's pure to being impure, and a person who's impure to be pure. You ever heard something that can change you either way? What is this concept over here? It can make a person pure, but it can also make you impure. And over here, that's where the difficulty lies. How do you have something that can make a person pure, but on the same side of the token, it can make another person impure? That means that if I'm a pure person and I'm sprinkling on you this water that I made out of the sacrifice of the Parah Aduma, I'm becoming impure, and now while I'm making you pure,
you sprinkle yourself.
then you can sprinkle yourself. You're already impure. So it's like you have a rat in your hand. You have to have someone else do it for you, but then he gets impure. So what's the never-ending chain over here? So מה קורה?
Throw it in the air.
What you do? You do Houdini. No, you put it in a bucket. I'm sure there's a way. Right now it escapes me. But the reality is,
The bathtub.
the who? The bathtub?
You have like a little mikveh.
A mikveh bathtub. יפה מאוד. Could be. Rock and roller. What do you say? Any other bright ideas? Put it in a toaster. Call a chas v'rosh. Long story short, we see there's a concept of this Parah Aduma, which is the whole, in essence, it almost has a difficulty to understand. But it doesn't mean that it's beyond, that it has no rationale to it. It just means that its rationale is so great that we cannot grasp it, we cannot hold it. Ad kei dekach, so much so, that the Midrash actually relates Bamidbar Rabbah, that Moshe Rabbeinu was the only person in the world to be divinely given as a gift. Hashem gave it to him, the logic behind Parah Aduma and all the chukim. Moshe Rabbeinu was one of the only people in the world who had the ability to understand even the deepest concepts, even in these things that make no sense. And why is that so great? Why that's so great? Because we see Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech was the greatest person, the greatest minds to ever live? Yes or no? Anyone can argue on this? Shlomo HaMelech was one of the smartest people to ever live? Yes or no? There's a midrash in Shir HaShirim Rabbah that says that the mind of Shlomo HaMelech was like no other person's mind in the whole entire world. So much so that when he saw you, he could already tell what you were thinking. He had the ability through wisdom, through his great chukhmah, when a person would come in front of him, how much wisdom he had. And there's so many, countless different stories of judgments that Shlomo HaMelech brought down, where you get to see a little bit of his chukhmah. And what does he say about the Parah Aduma? What does he write about the Parah Aduma? Vehi rechoka mimeni. It's very far away from me. I asked you a question. He doesn't write Parah Aduma. He just writes Vehi rechoka mimeni. How do we know from this sentence, Vehi rechoka mimeni, that it's very far away from me? It's beyond my comprehension. And by the way, this is talking about Parah Aduma and nothing else. Every other chok, every other divine ordinance, Shlomo HaMelech understood. But just one he didn't understand. How do you know? Take the words hi rechoka. What gematria do you have? What numerical value do you get? 341. Take the word parah aduma. What numerical value do you have? 341. When Shlomo HaMelech said hi rechoka, when it's rechok mimeni, this thing is so far from my beyond, from my comprehension, what are you talking about? Parah aduma. This is also hinted to, by the way, in the Gemara Masechet Yoma, where Rabbi Akiva quotes this pasuk in Kohelet, and he says, we see from over here that parah aduma, these waters that were made from the parah aduma that were sprinkled on people, this is what was so difficult for him to understand. Why? Because the reason we said, it makes one person pure and the other person impure. It was very difficult for Shlomo HaMelech. But Shlomo HaMelech was one of the greatest minds to ever live in the whole entire world. One of the greatest minds. And the Midrash relates a story, Aseret HaDibrot. The Midrash Aseret HaDibrot relates a story just to illustrate the point of who Shlomo HaMelech was. Let us understand what the greatness of Shlomo HaMelech was, and then we can understand what the magnitude of this statement is, that Shlomo HaMelech is Gadol Mimeni, that is greater than me. A story of 3 merchants who went out. They were Jewish merchants, and they went out with their produce and their goods and everything like that. They sold, and they collected a lot of money. And on the way back home, as they were going home with the money in their pocket, what ended up happening? אתה מכיר את הסיפור? מה interest עכשיו? מה הקטע, אחי? איפה they went to? They went to the store, they made money. This is time before cash advance. איפה כל הזמן ריצים? Your head's always in the... You guys are merchant cash advance? Relax, not an MCA. It's not an MCA. Don't worry. YMCA. You're a merchant cash advance. No. Stop. No, but 3 merchants, but man, back in the times, before the times that people were doing cash advance, yeah? 3 merchants, they went out, they made a lot of amounts of money, and on the way back home happened to be Shabbat. And what happened? They said, okay, we can't carry this money with us, and Shabbat now, it's muktzah, cannot touch it. So they decided all 3 of them, they're going to get together, they're going to bury their money in the ground, in one area, cover it up, and after Shabbat, after they rest, they sit down, they're going to make a bonfire, they're going to, hang a good time, smoke some s'mores, no, they're going to have a good time, they're going to sit down. No, chas v'shalom, before Shabbat, they put on the bonfire, but they didn't cook on it, al tidag, no cooking going on, 100% Shmirat Shabbat, don't worry. Okay? And they fell asleep. In the middle of the night, one of the guys wakes up, what does he do? He digs up all the money, moves it from one location to another location, digs it back up, flattens it, and says, you know what? I'm going to come back after Shabbat when everything, the water, everything cools down. I'll take back the money and, pocket it. I put it in my pocket. And I have 3 times the money. Good? He goes back to sleep that night. How do you go back to sleep after doing such an act? I have no idea. He goes back to sleep. He's like, you know what? Let me just quickly rob these guys a crook in the night. They wake him up in the morning. All 3 of them wake up. They sit down. They eat breakfast together. And bear in mind, still Shabbat the whole day. They're sitting down, talking, schmoozing. Everything's good. Nobody's the wiser. Motzei Shabbat, they start digging. And what do they find? The money's not there. Now all of a sudden, the 3 of them, what are they going to do? They start blaming each other. You're the thief. No, you're the thief. Now nobody knows who took it, except for that one guy who took it. Everybody else, and he's a good actor. You know what I'm saying? He knows what he's doing. It's not his first time at the rodeo. Huh? So he's like, no, you're the thief, not the thief. What do you mean? You're the only one who really knew. I already forgot where it was buried. I didn't even know it was here until you said it. You see, I wasn't the one who walked over here. You were the one who walked over here. Long story short, he starts selling himself. They're back and forth. They didn't know who was the one who did it. So what are they going to do? At one hand, they know their money's gone. On the other hand, they know it's one of the 3 of them. And they don't know who is guilty and not guilty. And they cannot prove it. So they say, you know what? This is something that we have to take to Shlomo HaMelech. They decided they went to Jerusalem. They went to Shlomo HaMelech. They come to Shlomo HaMelech. They explain to him. We came, Shabbat, we fell asleep. We dug up the money. We put it aside. We woke up, went to Shabbat. Lo there, what happened? The money's gone. We started fighting back, forth. You. Shlomo HaMelech listens attentively. Every word of the story. He tells him, look, let me sleep on it. Come back tomorrow. The guys come back tomorrow. And as soon as they walk in, Shlomo HaMelech tells them, look, I know you guys are merchants. So you guys are probably very, very clever. I had another case come to me. I want to know what you think. What's your opinion on the matter? So of course, the Shlomo HaMelech is asking for my opinion, Shlomo HaMelech, yeah, you know who I am. Size and debates. You know who I am. By the way, that's a secret in the world. Whenever you want to get to somebody, you want to appeal to them, you have to appeal to their, if they have ego, let's say, for example, there was one guy in the shul that nobody can get him to do anything. Good? So, whatever, one person, I want to say, who came to me and after, and told me, look, maybe you can get him to... So when I come to him, I said, look, you have to know how to play the game, you have to be smart. I came to him, Kvodo. I said, somebody of your stature, somebody of your esteem, on the high level that you are, obviously not sarcastic, yeah?
How many times did you bow down?
No bowing down, chas v'shalom. On such a high level that you're on, with your wisdom, with your chokhmah, אתה תקיף, אתה חריף, אתה בן אדם פלפל. No serious guy. Obviously, somebody of your esteem and your stature wouldn't act such a way. So maybe, what ended up happening, he said, you know what, you're right, somebody of my status shouldn't act this way. Sidu shalom b'neim. Don't worry, we're still in the therapy after, but the first things first is do shalom. But you see, when you want to appeal to a person, what do you have to do? You have to go to their what they think of themselves. They think that they're higabok ba'olam. You ever came to a person who thinks they're the smartest person in the room and try to argue with them? What ends up happening? Nah, I love when people come to me and tell me, well, everything you're going to tell me, I already know. Everything I'm going to tell you, you already know? So how come you're not here? What do you mean? If everything I'm going to tell you already know, then why are you not religious? Clear like day. No, everything you tell me I already know. Because, I always say this. It's a klal, side note. Who is the smartest person in the room? A person who thinks he knows everything or a person who thinks he knows nothing? Who's smarter?
The one that listens. One says that knows nothing.
You're giving a side answer. Who knows better? The one who knows everything or the one who thinks he doesn't know anything?
Thinks he doesn't know anything.
Why does the one think he doesn't know anything? Because he's hinting to it. Because he actually listens to everybody else.
Also, he wants to learn.
The guy who thinks I know everything, no shomea. What ends up happening to him? He becomes outdated. He gets outdated. The other guy keeps on growing. But long story short, we see that these people sometimes they have this about them. Shlomo HaMelech was very smart. He sensed the ordinance, so he told them, you guys are very, very clever. So for sure you're going to have an opinion on the matter. And what did they say? Oh, of course. Me? Of course I'm going to have an opinion. Shlomo HaMelech tells us this is the story. There was a girl and a boy who grew up in the same neighborhood. And when they grew up, they were friends, their families were very friendly, they would do Shabbatot together. And when they were very young, 5, 6 years old, they made each other a promise. That if they want to get married, they first have to come back and get permission from one another. Otherwise, they cannot get married. Like they're reserving each other for each other. We reach 2021, that's it. We know you're me, I'm you. And if anything changes, you give me a call, I'll let you know. Yes, no, yes. And it's go danyanim, and we're good to go. It wasn't a year or so until the girl ends up moving. She ends up moving to a different neighborhood. And now, you can imagine, 5, 6, how many years passed by, they already completely lost contact. When she was 20, 21 years old, she was marriageable age, and starts going on shidduchim. She meets a young guy in the neighborhood, and they get engaged. And now, as they're getting engaged, she's feeling very guilty. She remembers, I made a promise so long ago to that one guy, and I feel terrible that I'm going to go against the promise now. I promised him that I'm going to tell him. Now, who here is going to keep a promise what they made when they were 6 years old? Someone over here is going to go back. Someone going to say, I was 6 years old, it's not kayam. What promise 6 years old? But she couldn't let it go. She felt very, very, very guilty about it. And from here, by the way, we learn, side note, a very important principle. How much a person should be medakdek with his words. When a Muslim makes a promise, when a person's chotem, when a person says, I'm going to do something, you have to be a person who understands, you want to be a valuable person in the eyes of Hashem. It means that when you say, you do. Because every time you speak, whether you say it or whether you want to or not, you're making a neder. Unless you say the words bli neder, you're making a neder. You say, I'm coming. That's a neder. I'm going to be there. That's a neder. You just took upon yourself a vow to be there. And what chas v'shalom is going to happen? What's going to happen if you don't mikayem? Then you end up being over on a neder. You end up breaking a vow that you made. Your words have value. And therefore, when you say something, it has to mean something. What distinguishes a person who's valuable to a person who's not valuable, the person who's valuable, when he says, he does. A person who's not valuable, he says and he doesn't do. Yeah, I'm going to be there. How many times I hear, yeah, Rabbi, I'm going to be there. If everyone told me they were going to be here, we'd have 100 people in the room. If everybody was going to be, man, how many times you would say, I'm going to be. I'm serious. But the reality is, I'm a friar. You know why I'm a friar? I'm a sucker. Because I really believe them. You know, one time it happened to me, a guy shook my hand. He told me, I'm going to be there. He gave me a firm handshake. I called a mutual friend of ours. I told him he's coming this week. He starts cracking up. He's like, bro, you don't know him. He's not coming. I'm like, no. I'm telling you. I know he's coming. He shook my hand. Not stam text message, I'm coming BH. No. אתה זרקת את זה מהכובע, אחי. לא שמעתי, אחי. I heard the BH. No, I'm coming BH. No. The guy shook my hand. Shook. Firm handshake. I didn't know he was a real estate broker. Huh? I went and shook my hand, tells me I'm coming. I'm sure he's coming that Thursday. And I'm a sucker, and I'm thinking to myself, he's for sure coming? My friend tells me, are you willing to bet? I said, I'm not on bet. Thank God I'm religious. I would have lost money on that one. But I told if I was able to bet, 100% I'm betting. The guy shook my hand. Comes Thursday night. Nowhere to be seen, nowhere to be found. And not only that, more than that, he disappeared. The guy went off the map. I haven't seen him since. This is a year and a half ago. I think he moved to Guatemala just to get away from me. My capo. You promised you're going to come. Shook my hand. So we see when your words, when you promise something, it has value. And you also have to remember, when you promise something to another person, it hurts them if you don't come. It's a personal one. Okay? If you're watching. Okay, I'm kidding. Huh? But long story short, this girl, she feels, you know what, I have to go and I made this promise. I'm a person, I'm God-fearing. I don't want to go against my promises. God forbid it's going to correct my life. It's going to cause problems in my marriage. I want to do everything I can. And back then, they lived in the times when there was no cars. You couldn't get on a plane. You wanted to travel, you got to go by horse and buggy. And it's very far. She went and she sold all of her possessions to build up a lump sum of money. And she got on a horse and a buggy, and she went by herself. You don't want to tell anybody about it. Check it, so that her fiance is not going to hear about it. And she goes on her way. And it's a very long journey through, obviously, sometimes she's reaching through dangerous territories. And eventually, with the help of God, she gets there. She knocks on the door of the guy. The guy opens the door. He's so surprised to see her. It's almost 15, 14 years later. He says to her, oh, so nice to see you. She tells him, look, I'm engaged. I came over here because I remember the promise that I made you, that if I'm going to get married, I had to come for your consent. I know that I promised myself to you, and I'm assuming I haven't seen you in years. It may be difficult to release. I know whatever. I don't know, but I collected this money. I want to give you the money, and I'm asking you nicely, please, can you release me from this vow that I made you? And the guy looks at her, and what kind of guy, what kind of heart are you going to have take the money, or tell her, no, you're mine? You ready to tell her? Of course. I'm so sorry you had to come all this way. I apologize. Please, I'm not taking any money. You should have a be'atzlacha, a mazal. You should have a lot of success, have a wonderful marriage. And he wishes her the best, and he sends her off. On the way back home, as she left off on her piece, she's happy now, she's going home, shlema, complete. She knows that she was nullified herself of that vow. And she's on the way home. And as she's on the way home, an older man, robber, jumps out of the bush, old guy, and attacks her. Takes her pouch of money, and he wants to have his way with her. And she tells him, please, I'm begging you, don't do anything to me. I'm about to get married, so on and so forth. She starts telling him the story. I made a promise when I was 5 years old. They came, I promised. She tells him, look, if this young man at 20 years old, in the strength of his vigor and the strength, can control himself to let me go, surely a man like you, who is older, who is more wise, more intelligent, you could also be able to find the control to let me go. So the guy hears the story, older guy, says to himself, you know what? He touched his heart. I'm going to let you go. And not only am I going to let you go, I'm going to give you back the money. And she goes on her way, she goes back home, and she gets married. So Melech tells the 3 guys, one of the kings in the neighboring towns, in the neighboring cities, he asked me a question. Out of this whole story, who is the real true hero? I want to know your opinion. So the first guy says, of course, it's the girl. To go out of your way, sell everything you have, to get money for a promise you made when you're 5 years old? Who's doing such a thing? Obviously it's the girl. The second guy says, no, it's the boy. You know how much the girl's coming to think. She promised to let her go and not to take the money? And to let her off so nice. He acted such a place of selflessness. And he was such a good person. He's the real hero of the story. The third guy says, what are you guys talking about? Says, the robber, he had her in his hands. And he had the money in his hands. Okay, Mele, you want to tell me he let her go. But to let the money go also? He already had it in his possession. Shlomo Melech right away goes, arrest this man. They arrest the third guy. He says, your head was so focused on the money. The only thing you thought about was the money. That's how I know it was you. And as soon as they arrested him, he says, you know what? You're right. It was me. Who could think of such a parable? Who in their mind, in that moment, can think of such a parable? Three guys come in front of you now, say, okay, let me make up a whole story. Woman, this, that, boy, girl, Robert. Makarapo. What was going on? And not only that, to get them to answer straight away, only Shlomo HaMelech. You understand how great Shlomo HaMelech is? You understand what kind of mind we're dealing with over here? And he says, it's greater than me. I can't understand it. It's beyond my comprehension. This is the one thing. And everything else, Shlomo HaMelech was able to understand except for this. Everything else. And from here we learn a very, very important thing for our lives. All the wisdom in the world, and all the IQ in the world, will give you nothing in regards to humility. Moshe was not known as the smartest person in the world. What does the Torah say on him? The most humble person to ever live. And Hashem gave him one thing Shlomo HaMelech can never attain, through divinity. He said, Moshe Rabbeinu, ine, matana, present for me. Not because you think you're the smartest person in the world, not because you have the highest IQ, because you put yourself down to me. You said, Hashem, whatever you say, emet. Hashem says, now, I'll give you the divine wisdom. And Shlomo HaMelech, with all the kavod, everything you knew, everything you learned, all your wisdom, the smartest person to ever live in the whole entire world, and even this you couldn't get it, because the more you rely on yourself, there's always going to be migbalot, there's always going to be limitations. And this, maybe we can understand now the correlation between the Parah Aduma, between the red heifer, and purity. Why does the red heifer have so much of this power to purify a person? Because what it is. What is it? It's the only law in the Torah that Shlomo HaMelech couldn't figure out. Why? What is the correlation? What is it coming to teach us? In life, the more the person takes himself out of the equation, says, you know what? Take me out of it. There's no me. Whatever Hashem says, that's what we do. The more he takes himself out of it, the more he says, my logic, and takes it out, throws it out, Hashem says, this person, I'll give him the whole entire world. This person, I'll give him the whole entire world. You want to know what the secret to being close to God is? It's to making yourself tafil to God. You know what it means, tafil to God means? To let go and say, Hashem, I'm in your hands. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. And sometimes I don't understand. And sometimes, says the Midrash, this is exactly why it says, chok. You know what? What's the pasuk in the Torah say? Let's read it to you right now what it says. It says in the pasuk in the Torah, Zot chukat HaTorah asher tziva Hashem. What does that mean? Zot chukat HaTorah asher tziva Hashem. This is the divine ordinance that God commanded. You know the words that shine out over here the most of anything in the whole entire world? Asher tziva Hashem. Everyone in the world is so quick to say, wait, I want to understand it. I want it to make sense to me. I want you to explain to me backwards, forwards, and backwards and forwards before I do anything. But you forget one important element. Asher tiva Hashem. God is the one who said it. God is the one who commanded it. And sometimes in your life there's going to be things that are beyond your comprehension. They're beyond the ability of your mind to grasp in that moment. But you want to know how to get to lock in, to get into that wisdom, to get to the point where you can see through that divine wisdom, to see what's behind the scenes. You want to know how to get there? When you make yourself humble, when you make yourself tafel, when you make yourself down, say, Hashem, you're everything, I'm nothing. Moshe Rabbeinu had every reason in the whole entire world, to be a gavtan, to have ego, to be haughty. You know why? Moshe Rabbeinu, not only was he good looking and handsome, he also was extremely strong. He also, everything, he was extremely wealthy, everything you could imagine. He was a leader of the whole Jewish nation. He stopped all of Egypt, obviously with God, but seemingly with himself. Every reason to be the most haughty person in the world. And what does the Torah say about him? He's the most humble person to ever live. And because of that, because he was humble, God says there will never be a prophet in the world that will ever be closer to me. As Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to God, panim el panim, face to face. The only prophet in the whole entire world to ever talk to God face to face, to see God face to face, is Moshe Rabbeinu. And why? Not because he was the smartest person in the world, not because he was the smartest person, strongest person in the world, not because he was the most charming, not because he was the richest, not because all these other factors you want to imply. You know why he got so close to God? Because Hashem, I'm tefel to you. You're everything, I'm nothing. Whatever you say, that's the best. I'm taking me out of the equation. I'm letting go, and I'm letting you take the wheel. I'm trusting in you. I have faith in you. Parah Aduma, you know what it signifies? It signifies that moment in a person's life where he says, you know what, God? I don't see where this is going. I don't see the sense in this. I don't understand why everything that happened. We've seen just in Purim. What's the whole story of Purim? How many times Mordechai and Esther could have asked, why is this happening? Why did Haman get the ring? Why did Achashverosh agree to make this decree? Why are the people doing this? Well, every time he could have said it. And every single time they were coming, and they didn't say one time. Why? They went and they did whatever they had to do. They were tefel Hashem. And because they were tefel Hashem, because they put themselves down for God, and they put God in front of them, as we said last week, unfortunately the video didn't go out. But as we said last week, we see the Jewish people, they went with their own logic. They said, oh, we're going to go with our thinking. And we're going to go to this party. Even though what we said last week, that it was terrible to go to the party. But they had their own svara, their own thing. Rashi, Marsha, the food was kosher, wine was kosher. We spoke about it last week. And they went. And what ended up happening? At that moment, the decree came down from heaven to annihilate all the Jews from the whole entire world. And when did it get uprooted? When was it fixed? When Mordechai, when Haman said, let's everyone bow down to me. What did Mordechai do? Not only did he not bow down to him, not only said, I'm not going to bow down to you, he could have just walked away. Why didn't he walk away? There's a Agadah that said, we spoke about it last week, that Haman sold himself to Mordechai for a piece of bread. Also Gemara and Megillah also alludes to this. He walked up to him and slapped him on the thigh, as if to tell you, I know who you are, Habibi. You think you're all powerful, you want people to bow down to you? I know you're a fool. I know you're a sucker. Why did he do that? Why did he go out of his way? The logic dictates when there's danger, run away. Why are you running towards the danger? Why are you running into the fire? Because that's what Hashem wants me to do. So you run into the fire. Guess what? That was the first step. What was the second step? Esther's going to meet with the king. She wants the king to do whatever she wants. She doesn't get all dolled up. She doesn't get all pretty. She fasts for 3 days. A woman after fasting 3 days, you know what she's looking like? Like a zombie. And she came and she asked a request against logic. And only then, after Mordechai and Esther went against their logic and said, we're going with Hashem. We're putting our faith in Hashem. When we went out to war on the 13th of Adar, what did we do? We fasted. And because we fasted, we said, Hashem, we're not going out with our strength and our vigor. We're not going out to fight this war now with our power. No. We're going to fight this war right now with you. We're fasting to show you that we don't believe in ourselves. We believe only in you. And guess what happened? 0 casualties. Not one person died. 70,000 plus. 70,000 plus. Goyim passed away, and not one Jew. When a person says to himself, you know what, I'm taking myself out of the equation. I'm coming with God. This is a recurring thing. We see it all over the Torah. I've talked about it multiple times, and I continue to talk about it for hours and hours and hours, and different examples throughout the Torah. Such a concept that we see in life. This is something we have to apply in our lives every single day. The more a person works on it, the more a person is alert to it, the more a person understands that God is the one who's in control, the more he can live a happy life. The more the dark moments no longer seem dark. The more the down moments no longer seem down. If someone today told me, sometimes you go to situations, something happens. I'll say a personal example for me. That I've had situations in which all of a sudden, God required I have to give a certain type of amount of money. And it could be in that moment that I didn't have that money in the bank or whatever, right? And I'll be speaking to my wife or speaking to my mom. And she's like, how are you not stressed out? You have to come up with this money, you're not stressed out. I said, because I'm protected by Hashem. I don't have to pay anything, he's paying it all. What do you want from me? They sent me for my kids' school a thing for tuition. I said, how much do you reasonably believe you can afford for your tuition for all your children? You ever heard someone call the rabbi for this question? I called the rabbi. I said, Rabbi, what do I put in this question? Asking me how much can afford Hashem can afford. I promise you, that's what I called the rabbi. How much can Hashem afford? Whatever you want, I don't know. I told him, what do you mean, how much can I, whatever you want. This is what Hashem wants me to pay. I'm going to pay it. Hashem's going to take care of it. Don't worry about it. But I said, how much can you reasonably afford? I promise you. My wife's asking me for 3 days. I'll show you the text. But 3 days, give me an answer. I tell her I have to speak to the rabbi. Who will you speak to the rabbi to answer the question? I said, I don't understand what to answer the question. How do you answer the question? How much can you reasonably afford? How much can Hashem afford? It's not on me. I didn't feel comfortable even putting $1 less. Because Hashem can afford whatever he wants. But that emunah, that belief system that a person has, that when things come to his way, he's not even stressed out. You know how you get there? It's a muscle. You work it. You build it. You relearn it. We see this, Misat Yesharim, one of the Musar books by the Ramchal, he writes, in the beginning, introduction, that everything you're going to learn in this book, and in most cases when it comes to Musar, when it comes to introspection, is nothing new. It's nothing new. It's not something new you're going to learn in your life. It's something you already know. It's something that's very obvious to you. And you know why you forget it? Because it's so obvious to you. You know how you know? Everyone over here has stairs, at least a few stairs in their house, from the porch to the house, something. How many stairs do you have? Anybody in here knows exactly how many stairs they have going up the thing? I lived in my house for 4 years. I don't even know how many stairs there is over there. And I asked this question 4 weeks ago. I still don't know. It's just something that's so commonplace by you. You do it every single day. It doesn't come to your mind to even think about it. Rabbi Victor Miller says an exercise on this. He says put your finger in front of your eyes and look at something else. Put it right over here and look at the book over there. And what you'll see is that if you give it enough time, your finger will disappear. Why? Because the things that are closest to you, put it right here close to your nose. The things that are closest to you, you'll realize that the things that are the most that you forget. You tend to move away from it. You tend to run away from it. You want to know why? You want to know why? Because it's so obvious. It's over there. And that's why it needs constant review. That's why it needs constantly refreshing your mind. Because these concepts need to be refreshed and refreshed and refreshed and refreshed. And you constantly need to be aware of them, made aware of them, made aware of them. And that's how you work on it. You want to be a person that when things come to you in your way, in your life, you want to live a life of true happiness, of no stress, no worries, no dagot. Doesn't it sound like the paradise of life? It's here, it's in your hands. It's possible. It's not far from you. All you have to do is say to yourself, you know what? Let go. Hashem's in charge. Dark, not dark. Light, not light. Bad, good. Who's talking here?
What did you put on the paper?
Huh? Don't worry, I'll talk about it after. It's a different conversation. No, the rabbi told me, look. This is a different question. Yeah? I promise you I didn't feel comfortable put it down the list. I promise you that. And even when I put, you'd be surprised. You say, why'd you put this? I put it at a nice amount. I didn't, Adik Dag. I was even that I didn't want to put. And long story short, meaning I wanted to put more. Not the Chas v'Shalom the other way. Only now I realized how that could sound on the other end. No. I'm telling you wholeheartedly. I'm not stressed out about it. You know, you get a bill, $25,000 for the yeshiva tuition or whatever it is. You stressed out how it's going to come? It doesn't even come to my mind. It comes to my mind. Look throughout history. How many people had to pay yeshiva tuition? $100,000, 4 kids, 5 kids, 6 kids, and they all do it. How they do it, who knows? But they make it happen. Yeah, they have to go here, there, whatever. It doesn't make a difference. Hashem says, if you believe in me, if you hold in me, no problem. And all the stress and the worry is not going to get you anywhere. Calm down. He says, Hashem is driving the car. I'm good to go. And that's what Parah Adumah is. Parah Adumah is that it signifies that moment, it exemplifies that moment of a person saying, you know what? When the things that make the least sense, huh? In the things that make the least sense,
he just paid a bill.
יפה. הקדוש ברוך הוא pays it. זה אמת. I'm not joking. I'm saying. So who you want to make the check out to? הקדוש ברוך הוא. Serious. A long story short, this is what Parah Adumah means to tell us. That the things that make the least sense in your life, the things that don't make any sense. In those moments, when a person becomes strong and says, Hashem, now I believe in you, in things that don't make any sense, that's the secret to get closest to God. You want to get close to God? It's in those moments when you feel like, what's going on over here? In those moments when you believe and say, Hashem, I'm going with you, that's when you'll survive. That's when you go forward. That's when you continue. That's when Hashem will give you the divine wisdom. He'll open you up and show you what the goodness and the thing is actually going on over here. Sometimes we're so blind by the pain, the suffering, we don't see the good in anything. There's people who sit their life in depression as a sinking hole. Anxiety, depression, sadness, it's a black hole. It's quicksand. If it catches you, it'll pull you down. You know why? Because the more you focus on going down, the less likely you are to go up. When a person says, and I'm sinking, and what is he thinking about? I'm sinking. He doesn't think about I'm getting out. No, I'm sinking. And the more you think you're sinking, the more you sink, and the more you sink until you're all gone. You're all gone. So today I was preparing this shul. I said to myself, I need to find a story for this. That illustrates to this point. And you look at Hashem. Hashem is Zaveg Zivugim. He sets up relationships, not just husband and wife. Everything you see in life, every encounter you have, Hashem sets up. Happened to be, I heard the story today. It's a story, real story, of a woman named Rachel Leah Fry. That's her real name. She's from Alabama. Jewish woman from Alabama. She was raised by Jewish parents, but in Alabama, you can imagine, she was raised like a Christian. No Judaism, no Jewish roots or nothing. She got married, and when in the year, tell you right now what year it was. In the year 1986, she was 34 years old. Her husband was 42 years old. She was married to him for 16 years. And one day, her husband loses his mind. He decides he's going to hold his wife and his children in captivity. He's in hostages in the house for a prolonged period of time. And obviously with threats of killing them and killing himself. And this woman, Rachel, she says at that moment she was so terrified, she was so afraid, she didn't know what to do. She was so in the moment of fear, it didn't even cross her mind. She didn't grow up in a place of God, of religion. She just grew up and she was so sting. She was just begging and wishing for it to end. Until eventually her husband committed suicide. Right there in front of her and her children. Committed suicide. Killed himself. Now you can imagine what kind of trauma for that woman, for the kids. What kind of trauma it is after being held with threatening of death by your father, by your husband, and then watching your husband or your father kill himself. You can imagine what was going through her mind. What kind of trauma, what kind of terror. She says to herself, obviously, like anybody else, the question aroused, where was God in all of this? Where was God in all of this? And she tells the story over many years later. And she says, looking back at it now, I can tell you that God was there the whole time. Every single moment. You want to see the proof? The fact that me and my children made it out alive, that right there is showing me God. If a person was mentally unstable, he could have taken our lives. But the fact that we made it out, that in itself was God in the moment. But it took her a long time to realize that. In that moment when she finished all that, that became the essence of her life. That moment of her life became her life. And for 10 years, she went out of different mental institutes, another mental institute, another mental health, without avail, nothing helping. For 10 years, back and forth, going from place to place, trying to help herself, trying to get out of the trauma, falling into depression, falling into anxiety. And for 10 years, that moment, that story was her life. Her life was that story. She said after 10 years, in the years that ensued after that, she began to loosen the knot. All for 10 years she could focus on was the pain and the suffering and the anguish, the fact that she was sinking. After 10 years of wallowing in it, she said, I'm going to loosen the knot. And as soon as she loosened the knot, she says that was the first time she experienced God in her life. She felt God, she felt the love of God, and she realized that God is in her life, and God was there. And not only that, He saved her with a purpose. At this moment, she felt inspired to go and look into her Jewish roots. And she started learning about Judaism. And what ended up happening was, she ended up finding a rabbi in her town in Alabama. She ended up going to Chabad. And she ended up realizing with the time when she got closer to God, and realizing that she can be a Jew and connect with God, what ended up happening? She ended up publishing her stories and who she was today. And she says, she realized now her purpose. Once she opened up, once she found God, once she found Judaism, she started writing her story and how she found God. And she realized how many people she inspired in the world, how many people's lives she changed, how many people's lives she saved. So what ended up started being a sob story that everyone heard and felt bad for her, ended up becoming the most inspirational story for not only her children, and everyone else around her. It ended up becoming one of the most powerful, inspirational stories of a woman who made it out. She says, I heard this sentence reiterating in my mind back and forth. Let go and let God. Let go and let God. And that's what saved my life. When I said, I'm willing to let go and let God, and I found God, then I said, my life came back to me. I began to feel that breath of life come back to me. She got remarried, and now she lives a beautiful life. She's back in Alabama. She's still learning with the rabbi continuously, and she inspires millions of people, and she found her purpose. How did she get there? How do you take something so tragic, so difficult, and turn it into something that in the end we see, look how much beauty came out of it. Look how much she's doing for the world. Look how much she's inspiring people. Just us sitting over here today, how much are we getting inspired from her story? Why? She says to herself, you know what? I'm not going to waddle in the darkness and say why and start questioning. If I understand everything happens for a reason, everything is for my best, and ultimately it's bringing me to my greatest purpose, and I open my eyes, and I choose to see God, guess what? Every time you look for God in your life, you'll find Him. How do you know? I'll give you a proof from the Torah. Avraham Avinu, the first Jewish person in the world to ever live. Don't tell me it's a machloket. First Jewish person to ever live, Avraham Avinu. He started looking for God when he was 3 years old. And you know what happened? As soon as he looked for God, God said, you're looking for me? You'll find me. In a world where no one knew who God was. In a world where God was absent from the world. One little boy, Avraham Avinu, decided, you know what? I'm going to look for God. And guess what he found? And because of that, because this one little boy went running and looking for God, every single one of us sitting over here is around. Every single Jew in the world is existent today. A world with God in it existing today because one little boy decided, you know what, let me look for God. When you look for God in your life, inevitably, every time, every moment, every place, everywhere, dark, bad, up, down, sideways, doesn't matter where it is. You look for Him, you'll find Him. And guess what? Not only will you find Him, He'll pull you out of whatever suffering you're in. He'll save you. He'll bring you back. He'll bring you back your life. He'll bring you back to life. He'll give you a happy life, a joyous life. But all you need to do is find Him. And that's Parah Adumah that we're going to read this Shabbat. Parah Adumah is saying, take your mind and put it away. Take your mind and say, Any sechil, any dat, adi lo yada. Take it and throw it out. Right now I'm going only with God. When you do that, that's what the ultimate lesson of purity is. That's what that closeness is. That's when you say, Hashem, now I'm next to you. Now I'm ready for you. Now I'm ready to move. And that's why Parah Adumah comes before a Chodesh. Benisan, Nigalnu. Benisan, Atidim Nigayin. In Nisan we came out of Egypt, out of the first exile. And in Nisan, this month coming, we're going to end up taking out this third exile. Hashem says, I want you to be ready. I want you to be there. How are you going to be ready? Parah Adumah. Taking yourself and say, I'm not here. Hashem, it's all you. When you do that, Nisan comes, Beit HaMikdash, then we get the ultimate redemption, and then we get to be Zocher with Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Rav Yameinu Chen Ratzon V'Lomar Amen.